The current administration is trying to implement a liability shield for the pesticide companies so that when it's proven that these products are causing cancer and causing all of these terrible side effects for us, that there's nothing we can do about it, we will not be able to sue them.
I think this is the largest potential crisis we have in health in this country. You look at atrazine, that is another chemical that made the frogs gay. But this same chemical is in the drinking water over 30 states.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Carnivore Revolution. I'm Serena, and today we have a guest who is known as Glyphosate Girl on Instagram. She has an amazing page, so if you're not over there, make sure you check it out. We have Kelly Ryerson with us, and Kelly is amazing. Kelly knows all kinds of stuff about all the pesticides, all the poisons that are on our food. So we're going to be talking about that. Kelly, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. We were on a Maha call together last week, or week before last, and I just said, I got to see if she'll come on and talk about all of this because it's so crazy that there are so many things that are poisonous, and we are not fear-mongering here. Don't come at me. We are not fear-mongering here. This is a real thing, and these things are making us sick.
That's exactly it. And it's so hard because, and when I got into this, I really knew nothing about pesticides or really anything. I had no connection whatsoever with the farm or I even understood where things were grown. And it's just something that a lot of us are completely separate from because, that's kind of nice. There's such plentiful food that you're not even really having to think about the connection of how it was grown in general. But once you really start digging into what we're actually eating and what is involved in the creation of a lot of our crops, and particularly the United States, it can be kind of stunning.
Yeah. Absolutely. And the thing that prompted me to ask you to come on was really surprising me. I hadn't heard about this in the news, so they are not covering this, or if they are, they're not covering it very much. So I was shocked when I heard you talking about this on that call, that the current administration is trying to implement a liability shield for the pesticide companies, for those things that are making us sick, so that when it's proven even more than it's already been proven that these products are causing cancer and causing all of these terrible side effects for us, that there's nothing we can do about it, we will not be able to sue them.
Isn't this just like, when you say that, isn't it just so stunning that that is the case? And you're right. Media is not by and large covering this because chemical companies provide a lot of funding to different media outlets. Politico has on the top line, like byline, that it's funded by Bayer. Bayer is the corporation that bought Monsanto and now is on the hook for a lot of the liability cases of the Roundup cancer connection. And so when you have them out there funding media, and it's no surprise that this isn't making mainstream. Unfortunately, I think this is the largest potential crisis we have in health in this country, the largest crisis that we've had in a long time. And I'm so glad that you were able to join that meeting and invited me on so I can share more with people about what's involved.
Yeah. And we talk about this a lot. Like if you're somebody who's in the health space, if you have any sort of channel, whether it's carnivore, keto, natural, vegan, like all across the board in the health space, we talk about the pesticides that are making us sick. But I think the general population just doesn't understand the magnitude of it. They think, well, I'll just buy, the organic fruits and vegetables or whatever, but then they're still eating oatmeal. They're still eating, their kids are still eating cereal, or they're still eating bread from the grocery store. And people don't realize that all of those processed foods, all of those things, even the healthy ones, typically come from a crop that has been sprayed with something. And initially, they weren't making us as sick because people will say, oh, I ate that when I was little. It's fine. No, you didn't. You didn't eat it the way it is now. Between the artificial ingredients that are in it and the pesticides that are on it, this same oatmeal or that same cereal or jelly or whatever that you ate when you were growing up, if you're an adult now, is not the same as what you're giving your kids.
It is entirely not the same. And I'm so glad that you're saying that because it can be frustrating, even with, my parents understand it now. But at first they were saying, look, we're perfectly healthy. We haven't had all these food allergies. It can't be, and then you see, my generation, and then certainly in my kids' generation, this explosion of food sensitivities and allergies, and that connection there with the pesticides is not always there. And the way that I got into this is that I had a chronic illness. It was autoimmune like. I went to 20 different specialists and no one could give me an answer as to what was wrong with me. A lot of different doctors said that I was imagining it. And so maybe it's a psychological problem. But I was like, I don't think psychological problems give me like rashes, poor eyesight, the inability to walk, like tingling hands, all these problems. Like I was layered on different medications because that's what we do.
Of course.
And so I was 2 antidepressants, a benzodiazepine. Note that these are psychological drugs.
Yeah.
And gabapentin, and then a steroid for inflammation. I had a hysterectomy. I had sinus surgery. Okay. So this is all because of some underlying condition that was undiagnosable. Finally, doctor said she thought I should try going gluten-free. And I thought, okay, with everything that I just went through at Stanford University's hospital, with all these top specialists, why would like going gluten-free do anything? Like we've tested everything. And I tried going gluten-free, and lo and behold, my problems started going away. And then I actually went to see a psychiatrist because I was like, maybe I could use it one way or the other. I feel like I need a psychiatrist because they're telling me I'm crazy and it's making me crazy. So I went there, I had intake blood work, and that blood work showed that I was severely vitamin deficient, like across the board. I mean, really bad, like 0 vitamin C. And no one had tested that. And so I realized I had malabsorption and was able to heal myself. And so I started really questioning, why was my gut in such bad shape that I wasn't absorbing anything? And why am I not able to eat gluten anymore? And I went to a conference at Columbia University, their celiac center, and I listened to the different scientists talk about this new epidemic of gluten sensitivity and what might be behind it. And I went and I asked in the microphone, I'm like, are the farmers spraying anything on the crops that might be causing it? And no one knew. And then someone from General Mills came and found me and said, oh, actually, they're spraying Roundup right before harvest on the grain regularly. Like, that's just what the farmers do. And I'm like, well, that doesn't sound good. Started digging into this and realized just how much this low dose of dietary exposure to glyphosate on a regular basis is completely impacting our microbiome, our gut lining, so much, our endocrine system, is connected with cancer. Glyphosate is the most sprayed pesticide of all time globally. It's everywhere. It's been, this placenta. I sent my daughter's baby tooth, which formed in utero, into a lab, and it came back positive for glyphosate. I mean, this is truly everywhere. And so you have to start then thinking, okay, well, what else? This is just one pesticide. And you start looking at different fungicides that are sprayed regularly. And you look at other herbicides like atrazine and paraquat that are sprayed regularly. And you start thinking, okay, anyone can do this, by the way. You can go into PubMed, which is a database online. You can put in different search terms and you can see all of the peer-reviewed published research come up from different scientists. You can go in and you can read it for yourself. This research has been performed and it's been ignored by our government because of corporate interests. So it's definitely hurting us across the board with all of our different body systems. And I've actually gone to the EPA and presented this research to them, to which they have completely ignored. So it's not that they don't know about it. I actually, when I first learned about it, I thought, this is when I trusted the regulators. I said, oh, I just need to go tell them. I'm going to tell them. I'm going to bring these scientists. They're going to talk about what they found. They're going to be so shocked. They know that it's causing this harm, and they're doing everything to cover it up.
Well, that was one of the questions I was going to ask you, was about the EPA, because that seems crazy to me. What are they there for if they're not there to protect the environment? I mean, that's obviously not good for the environment if it's doing what it's doing to us, killing whole areas of species that area needs for the agriculture even, right?
Oh, entirely is. It is destroying ecosystems. And we have this enormous pollinator collapse that I think a lot of people write off as being something that only super environmentalist hippie people would care about. This is so incredibly emblematic of what's happening on a larger scale, because once the pollinators go, we are also impacted. We're not only impacted by food production, but also if it is having that kind of impact on the pollinators, it is certainly impacting our biology as well. And this crash is highly connected to neonicotinoids, neonics for short. And it is connected with even glyphosate. It's connected with all of these different pesticides that are regularly sprayed. And what's so upsetting is that now tech companies are looking to find technological alternatives to pollination because they don't have enough pollinators because pesticides have killed them all. And so you see this destruction of ecosystems and wonder, okay, humanity and all other types of life are likely to follow. And what's interesting is that the EPA did a biological evaluation a few years ago because they have to by law to see the impact of pesticides on different biological species, particularly endangered species. And they found it was over 90% of endangered species are impacted, either killed or highly impacted by exposure to glyphosate in waterways or on land or spray. And so that should have triggered, okay, I think we need to pull the registration of glyphosate. And it did nothing. And just a reminder to those that I'm sure your listeners know, we are not that different biologically from these animals.
Yeah. And the other thing about it isn't even just the effects of the glyphosate or of all of those pesticides that are causing negative effects for us. It's the forever chemicals that are associated with that. So how does that work with those forever chemicals? And is there any way around that? Or are we damaging our soil to the point where that soil will never be healthy again?
Well, and this is so terrible. And this is a big controversy right now because actually the current administration is backing off on its research of the impact of forever chemicals on soil. And what's interesting is Brooke Rollins, who's our head of the USDA, her mom is an assemblywoman in Texas, and this is her issue, is forever chemicals. A lot of us are just kind of watching this and thinking we know where she sits. Now, she's not in charge of that, though she is in charge of the soil. So it has been catastrophic for various farmers to have contamination, whether it's from waterways or from sewer or the sludge that they're using for manure that they're bringing onto the soil, and it's contaminated with these forever chemicals. You can't get rid of them. That's why they're forever chemicals. So I think that there's going to have to be a very large industry that is going to be able to remediate it because it contaminates our crops and what we're eating as well.
Even if they're not currently spraying it, that doesn't mean the crop isn't contaminated already.
Exactly. It's taking the sewer sludge and using it as manure and redistributing it just on our soil and into our food.
So for people who don't know, what are some of the effects, some of the things that are happening to us from all of these toxins and all the things that are being sprayed on our foods?
Some of the headline things are certainly cancer because of the glyphosate cancer cases that really, stand to bankrupt Bayer because there are so many cases. But one thing that I really am trying to highlight now is the fertility piece because it's an area that people aren't really talking about, and I think they should be. Unfortunately, you have, once again, a situation where there are a lot of different industries that stand to benefit from infertility, including the IVF industry. It stands to be, an enormous industry because so many women are struggling getting pregnant now at this point. And what was so distressing to me is that I even brought this to the EPA. The EPA claims that glyphosate is not an endocrine disruptor. And they say this based on industry-provided research that I wasn't allowed to see. So they wouldn't give me access to it. They based it on that. They said it's not an endocrine disruptor. We're not going to look at it any further. Meanwhile, there is this enormous body of research that shows all kinds of endocrine disruption, decreased estrogen, decreased testosterone, impacting the prostate, crossing the blood-testes barrier, ending up in sperm and semen and impacting sperm. Even like it's the ovaries, it's the ovarian follicles that are also impacted by glyphosate. And that's just one chemical. Some things are even more toxic. You look at atrazine, that is another chemical that famously, made the frogs gay, for those who are wondering. That was a study that was done at Berkeley by Tyrone Hayes, and he's a scientist there. And he exposed Syngenta, the chemical company, hired him to expose and study his frogs and see what happens at environmentally relevant levels of exposure to atrazine. Well, it ended up being so endocrine disrupting that it was feminizing the male frogs. And it was really just something else. So then Syngenta came after him and said, you can't publish this, and threatened him and his life and everything. And he went ahead and he published it, which is amazing. But this same chemical that is not just that, it's been connected with penis malformations as well, is in the drinking water of over 30 states. And so, in particularly Texas, once again, Texas coming up, Texas has a really large, in terms of the different areas of the country, it has probably the most exposure in drinking water. And that is such a basic, we cannot have this anymore. Cutting out atrazine doesn't really even do much to the economy. It just makes us healthier. And so that's another example of just craziness. And, and it's not even a partisan issue because it has been every single party has protected this. Obama came in talking about having an organic garden in the White House. And then lo and behold, not only was that shut down, but he oversaw the passage of the Monsanto Protection Act to make sure that labeling didn't let you know what you were actually eating. And the Bushes certainly were well behind it. The Clintons to this day say in order to feed the world, you need these chemicals. And the first Trump administration, actually in the glyphosate litigation, Trump came out and said, don't worry, the White House has Monsanto's back on glyphosate. And so that was the first administration. And then, Biden came in and then it was like, yay, Biden's going to do something great. Well, no, they didn't. In fact, the person that I met with that was over at the FDA, who was head of human foods, we brought him all kinds of horrible results of toxicity in baby formula and otherwise. Did absolutely nothing. Even reported that in the Moms Across America study, it was found that the gluten-free bagels at Trader Joe's actually had tons of gluten, which is really horrible for celiacs. Reported up to the FDA, they did nothing. They didn't recall it. They didn't do anything. And so you're looking at this, and so I was so curious about this guy. His name's Jim Jones. I was so curious after meeting him because I was like, what is going on with this guy? He doesn't care. I look and I see, he actually came over. Previously, he worked for the Office of Pesticides at the EPA, protecting them. So, it's just what really drives me nuts is the partisan arguments around this because it is so much bigger than that. We actually don't even have time to fight about it. And that's where MAHA came up really as an independent movement because it's like we want to prioritize health, right? Who's going to take us?
Yeah. But the thing about that is that MAHA was created by, the government. It was initially during campaigning where that happened. And somehow now the MAHA people have had to separate themselves from that administration that started the MAHA thing. And that's, no matter what side you're on, first of all, no matter what side we're on, we should be for this Make America Healthy Again movement. It doesn't matter if you're a Democrat or Republican or somewhere in the middle, that shouldn't matter. Everybody should want America to be healthy again. So it's really frustrating for people who supported that administration. And, the people who didn't support the administration are loving it.
They're loving it, which is sad, too, because it's like, do you really want this to fail?
Right. What kind of person wants America to stay in its current state where we couldn't field an army? We don't have enough young people, healthy people in this country to field an army if there was a war. Like, that should be big. If nothing else, that should be big. Yeah, that should be huge. So it's frustrating for people. And this MAHA movement has had to kind of separate. So I just wonder, what's Bobby doing? What's Bobby saying? Because that was his platform to stand on, basically. And so many people that I know voted for the current administration because of Bobby, because of all of this Make America Healthy Again and all these promises. So how can they in good conscience do this and back off from so many of those health initiatives that they were supposed to do for us? And the corruption, there was talk about that too, about getting that corruption out of the FDA. And so that's super frustrating for people because even people who didn't support the administration, some of them thought this was the answer, that there were some Democrats that thought this is the answer, we're going to be healthy again. And so do you know what's going on there? How are some of them allowing this to happen?
Well, I know that a lot of MAHA contributed to and hoped that the first commission report was going to be much stronger against pesticides. And I know Bobby to be someone that, committed a lot of his career to trying to get us healthy food and decontaminate both the environment and in our bodies. The pushback is so ferocious that I've never seen in all of my career working on this level of pushback from the chemical industry and the farming communities, the chemical farming communities. It's very disturbing. I know that a lot of these farming groups called on Callie Means to go and travel to their farms so that people would understand you can't farm without chemicals. And it's just, it is the big sell right now. And so my feeling with Maha is that I actually think some really exciting things have happened in terms of food and drugs. And what I really wish is that the appointment over at the EPA had been someone that truly was Maha forward, because we can't, without getting the EPA on board, it's going to be really hard to do what we want to in this area. And I'm not even talking about Lee Zeldin. The appointees that are under Lee are lobbyists. In fact, one, his name's Kyle, he was brought in right after the commission report was released. And he's been the hugest proponent of dicamba, which is a terrible pesticide for many reasons, but in particular, it drifts unlike any other pesticide. So it goes and it ruins neighboring farms. And it's really hard to prove that that's what happened or get any kind of payment for it. And so it's really a mess. And so the courts have many times said we just have to outlaw dicamba because this is ruining people's property. Well, this guy comes into the EPA, first thing he does, dicamba, let's get it back out there. Let's not put any reservations on it. And I actually have asked all around, I'm like, who appointed that person? Like, who said that person can come into this situation? Because we had higher hopes for Lee Zeldin. And so someone in the industry, I don't think it's Trump, actually. It's a deeper level of play here that somehow managed to force that person into that position. And it's so disappointing because you don't even have to say, like, bring in activists that are anti-pesticide into that. That's not even what we're talking about. Can you bring someone that's actually willing to look at the research and say, maybe there's a problem here, let's assess it further. And wow, that's terrible that kills sperm, right? That should be a really logical thing. So I'm very frustrated at the moment on the EPA side. I still have a lot of hope that overall at the end of the 4 years that we're going to see enough wins overall in health that it will have been worth it, just given that. And people have really been complaining, but look what he's doing on the EPA. It's so much worse. It's so much worse. It actually isn't. It's incrementally worse. We still are just screwed. It's not so much worse that now we have a problem. We already had this problem. But
yeah, and it has been proven that some of these pesticides, some of these chemicals cause cancer. I mean, that
it is.
They absolutely do. And we didn't have, the amount of cancer that we have today would have been unfathomable 50 years ago.
Can you imagine?
Yeah. I mean, it has grown so much. And the difference is the one of the big differences, I mean, sure, there's lots of other toxins in the air and things like that, but one of the biggest differences that we have made in the last 50 years is the food industry. If you go back and look at pictures of grocery store aisles from the 1970s, they didn't look like they look now. The ingredient list didn't look like they look now. Even at your fast food restaurants, they were serving mostly fresh food at your fast food restaurants, your school lunches, the nursing homes and hospitals. They were all serving fresh food then that were not covered in pesticides like this. So we may have bigger agriculture now, but that doesn't make it better.
It definitely doesn't make it better. And so many small farms have closed because they just can't make ends meet in competing with these large players. And so it's not that, and it really gets me when these large ag chem groups are saying, oh, you're not supporting the farmer, because these farming communities, first of all, are frontline exposure. Their infertility rates tend to be much higher than people that live in cities. Their cancer levels are so much higher. I think Iowa has the number 2 level of cancer, and that's because it's just all of this spray that's around all of the time. And to think that these farmers, by and large, are having this great, easy life because of chemicals is just not true, because what the government does is it subsidizes this type of chemical agriculture. It's not even enough money to make the farmers really, truly profitable. So most farmers have a second job off of the farm. It needs to change where they can get back onto the farm. They can be profitable in what they're doing. And that's going to take spending less on inputs and these chemical inputs and healing the soil. But once you do that, you see all of these stories of farmers that I've worked with that are able to actually have a profitable farm, medium, even large scale farm, profitable. A lot are able to get off of government subsidies because sometimes they don't qualify for it anymore because they're not spraying things, which a lot of times they require. Can you imagine that?
That's insane.
It's so crazy. And, and one of the first things that a lot of farmers try when they first try to make this conversion off of all chemicals is they won't spray a fungicide. First of all, fungicides are super toxic, and they're very much behind this new rise in treatment-resistant fungal infections in humans, which you're seeing now, which is similar to the people that have bacterial infections that are treatment resistant. It's a similar kind of thing. Anyway, so the farmers will go in and they are told a lot of times by crop insurers they have to spray the fungicide prophylactically, whether or not they have a fungal outbreak or not, if they want to have the insurance. Well, so that's a huge risk, right? And so a lot of them will just do on they'll try it on one part of their field. They won't spray the first year just to prove to themselves that they're going to be okay and they're going to still stay afloat. But it's a scary thing. And it's the kind of thing where you really need other farmers that have been successful to come and just really support that transition.
So what is the reason for this backed by the government for this liability shield? Do you think we talk a lot about payoffs with the FDA for vaccines, and drugs and all kinds of things? Do you think that's what's happening here? I mean,
oh my gosh.
What other reason does the government have for not protecting us?
Isn't that so true? So that's exactly it. Because I thought, okay, what are the arguments for having a liability shield, right? Like, how can these companies really convince our elected officials this is some kind of great idea? And the only way you could really do that is either by paying them, which I wish I had proof of. I mean, it looks like it. Or you're lying about what it actually does, which I think in some cases is true. Because the way that they are labeling this in the different bills is so deceptive and seems so innocuous that people are saying that's not a liability shield. I mean, the Congress people are saying you're worried about something it isn't. And this all came about because of they are potentially going bankrupt from all of these lawsuits about glyphosate causing cancer. And the thing is that they could get rid of these lawsuits tomorrow if they put a simple label that says some studies show that it might be connected with cancer. Okay, like it could be done. We could be done with it, and it's the truth. They won't do it. They would rather go bankrupt than admit that some studies show, even though any one of us can go look at these studies and see that, yes, it is.
Like people won't.
They won't. And so we're just going to choose to still believe it, most people. And so instead of doing that, then they got the whole industry behind this idea, and they even published it on their corporate website. This is how we're going to deal with it. We are going to try and pass litigation we're going to try and pass legislation at the state level, at the federal level, and we're going to appeal this court case all the way to the Supreme Court. And we're going to make it so that the EPA, what's called, preempts all other opinions on a chemical. So that in this latest case, the way that they're doing it is they have this bill in the appropriations bill, and they have a little section in it called 453. That's the number of it. And what they're saying is that no money can be spent to update EPA label rules and decisions without first doing a full new human health assessment. Now, these assessments are extremely cost prohibitive and they take years. I mean, the last one that was done for glyphosate was 1993, and it needs a new one, but they don't want to do it because they know what it's going to show. Right. So it's effectively taking the liability off of the manufacturer. So in this case, Bayer could say, oh, we told the EPA that it might cause cancer, but they couldn't update the label. And so you can't sue Bayer because they supposedly told the EPA. It's impossible almost to sue the EPA and say, how come you didn't warn us? So it's just completely taking themselves out of the line of liability. And it's disgusting. It's disgusting. Yeah. And this isn't just glyphosate. This is 57,000 different chemicals that now, when we get sick from them, we wouldn't be able to sue from getting sick.
Yeah. And you'd think after Aaron Brockovich that people would be more cautious, that people would be more careful with what they eat and what they put into their bodies and pay attention to things like this. I think at this point, the only way is for Americans to take a stand. I mean, Americans are going to have to do something crazy. There needs to be a march on Washington, or something crazy has to happen in order for them to realize we're not going to stand for this anymore. I mean, even organic isn't really organic anymore because so much of it has the appeal on it. And so much of it is grown in soil that's already been damaged, right?
Totally. Yeah. So much of it is grown. And a lot of that organic food, I mean, I still eat organically because I know I'm going to have less pesticide exposure.
Right.
But it is not nutrient dense like it should be in most cases because that soil isn't very healthy. It's tilled. It has organic pesticides that are in it. And so the nutrient density sometimes isn't even all that great. Then you have to go down this rabbit hole and you're like, okay, well, who also farms regeneratively and organically, which is what farming always was before chemicals entered the picture and tilling entered the picture. So for us to have to go to those lengths, and by the way, I bought some regenerative tea and I think it was like an $18 box of tea, like it's so cost prohibitive. Like that was a huge treat.
Yeah,
and
it's terrible.
So you're absolutely 100% right in terms of we have to be loud and this is going to take a lot. There is no more ferocious lobby in DC than the agricultural, chemical, and farming lobbies. They are the biggest ones. Pharma isn't as big. Oil and gas isn't as big. This is the one. And so it is going to take just such a massive, just a statement and protest on the behalf of all of us that don't want that exposure. And of course, as you know, it's hard to do because most people don't pay attention and most people don't think these things can be that bad if the EPA said that they're okay, because there's still this underlying trust.
Yeah, we trust the government with our kids with school, which I didn't. We homeschooled. But people trust the government with their kids for school. They trust the hospitals who are regulated by the government. People trust all of this, and it's all contaminated. It's all contaminated.
And I've told many people along the way, there's very little you can do without fully gut renovating or eliminating the EPA and starting over. Like and the USDA for that matter too. Both of them. Yeah. They just need to, and I do think that that's more or less what's happening over at HHS. It needs to happen on the other fronts too, because they're not regulating. You really shouldn't trust anything. You need to look into everything yourself. And, and a lot of us aren't feeling well, and then we don't have energy even to go and look into it ourselves. So that's a problem. And and
then you go to the doctor and nobody asks you what you're eating. They don't want to ask eating. They just want to put you on a pill.
No one, and I'm so glad you brought that up. No one asked me in those 20 specialists what I'm eating, even the gastroenterologist.
Isn't that crazy?
Isn't that nuts? And it's even crazier when I look back. I'm like, I wasn't thinking about it. I was like, oh, I wasn't eating well, but I didn't even think of it. That's weird.
Yeah. Really weird. Now, let me ask you something. I listened to your podcast with Alex Clark from last week, and you mentioned something about a spy following you at some point. Tell that story, because I think this is like the deepest depths of what's going on out there that your average person doesn't get to see or hear.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So imagine this. So I'm new to the issue and everything, and I'm just excited with my little graphic glyphosate girl writing my blog, right? Of how to glyphosate. And there weren't many. The reason why I was doing that, I went to the first 3 trials actually against glyphosate. And that's where I met RFK Jr. because he was one of the litigators. And it was very clear to me that no one was going to be really covering the day by day, even though I told ABC News, at some point, this is the biggest story that there is, but they didn't realize that. And I'm like, this really is huge. It impacts all humanity. And so I was there. I quit my job at the time, and I just was following these trials and writing every single detail of all the corruption that was coming out of these trials, including at the EPA. I mean, just awful things, ghostwriting research to be sure that it could pass. Just awful internal documents showing the way that Monsanto operated. And it's all of these chemical companies, but to keep an eye on people, manipulate the message, manipulate the media, all of this corporate strategy goes behind keeping poisons on the market. And so I'm reporting all that. And then suddenly a new person enters the courtroom, and she is just a nice person, a mom. And she said, oh, I've just been really inspired. I know who you are. I've enjoyed reading your things. I'm also a mom blogger. And so I just want to be here and report it. And so I believed it. And she was great, really nice person. And
somebody you want to be friends with.
Definitely someone I'd want to be friends with, and became friends with her. And then late one night, I got a call from a journalist who covered some of the case. And she said, oh my gosh, you know who that is? And she's like, she's not who you think she is. And she had gone back and found that she worked for one of the groups that Monsanto hires that's basically a PR group in controlling the message. And so I freaked. So I'm like, oh my gosh, I didn't anticipate this level. I should have. Now I look back, because there's a lot of dark ops that go on around all of this. And she disappeared. She never came back. And so at that point, I realized that my phone was likely tapped. And I started using some burner phones actually to communicate, because I was like, okay, I don't know what's tapped and what's not. My blog was broken into. Text was taken out of my blog. I mean, crazy. There were spies that were all over the courthouse that were listening on things, acting like they were homeless people. I mean, it's wild what they do. And they even like have kept a register of who all the anti-pesticide activists are, who's going to stand in their way. They pay different websites that sound very scientific to then write hit pieces on all of us and what we do. And it's very orchestrated. And the plan is, so now you could get off of this. And like, if you're following me on Twitter, you would see it's a little less on Instagram, but certainly on Twitter, particularly over, during that time of the trials, you would see these responses immediately discrediting anything that I'd say and say I was crazy, and like memes going up and like, what a nut, the conspiracy theorist, tinfoil hat, and that's the kind of thing, just the shaming so that people don't think you're legitimate.
Yeah, absolutely. So what it reminds me of is the movie Dope Sick with Michael Keaton. Have you seen that movie? It's a documentary. It's not actually.
Yes, I have seen it. Yes. Yeah.
That is crazy. So if you guys, because like just you telling us about this spy thing, it's like you think that only happens in the movies, right? But it actually happens in the real world in our lives.
It happens.
Yeah, in the United States, about agriculture, like about drugs and about pesticides. This is currently happening in the United States. People are being paid off to accept things for Americans that are making us sick that aren't even allowed in other countries. But Dope Sick has Michael Keaton in it. It's a mini series. If you guys haven't watched it, find that, because I like to relate to what happens in that to the food industry, because I feel like it's the same thing. And this movie is basically about the Sackler family who owned a drug company. They hired somebody, they got somebody from the FDA to meet them in the middle of the night to help them word the packages. And black labels, like when you put on really serious drugs, it should have been black label, but then the way they worded it, they worked around it. And this guy helped him and later went to go work for them to make millions of dollars. Like the whole thing was a scam. Their pharmaceutical reps are celebrating and having parties, and they're taking doctors on all expense paid trips to the Caribbean for 2 days to teach them about this amazing drug they should be giving. And the more they prescribe, the more perks they get. I mean, that actually happened. Actually, we're in Southwest Virginia. It happened. The actual court trial happened in our town, just a few miles from here at the court.
Did it really? Oh
yeah,
my God.
It did. This is the mountains of Appalachia. And they actually, in some of the towns near us, they actually had to close the schools because there weren't enough kids anymore to go to school. That's how bad it was. There were people standing on street corners in line to get into these doctors' offices where they would just write them the prescription for the opioids. I mean, it was terrible. And I really believe, watch that miniseries, you won't believe it, but I really believe that is what's happening in the food industry as well. That's what's going on in the food industry.
That's totally what's happening.
It's the exact same thing. I was pacing in my living room. There were times where I was yelling at the TV. There were times I was crying. I mean, it was so emotional to know that that's what's happening all around us. And the things we need to survive, we do need some medicines. I believe there's a place for modern medicine. Absolutely. We need that. We need the good, healthy foods to survive. And so if you guys haven't seen that, I'm glad you've seen it. If you guys haven't seen that, don't you agree? Like people should watch that and relate that to food.
It's the same thing. And it's this manipulation of definitely getting doctors, scientists to come out and defend they have a whole team of scientists that they pay to write articles. One of them is here at Hoover at Stanford. It's all a front. It's a front. And if you criticize it, and this is particularly true for scientists and academics who come out and they publish and they are bold enough to publish things and say something about it, they are dragged through the mud. And a lot of times the agricultural chemical companies will contact the academic journal and say, you have to retract that. That's inaccurate. And so that just choosing that life, there are a lot of warrior scientists out there that are willing to look at it. And thank goodness, because it's really gruesome what they do.
Yeah. And in this instance, in the family that was in Dope Sick, they were evil. They knew that they were lying about the drug, but they were getting rich off it. So they continued to do it. They made different versions of it that were making people even more addicted to it. And they did end up getting in trouble. They were sued. They did end up getting in trouble, but don't you worry. They're still doing just fine. One of them just bought Mick Jagger's house in the UK.
No.
Yeah. So all these hundreds of thousands of people died because of their opioid. And it's just sickening that they're still living it up in the UK in Mick Jagger's old house.
That's disgusting.
Isn't that disgusting? I know. Just like, I did research after we watched it.
Oh my gosh,
It was life altering for me to watch that and see what happens in those industries. Like I could cry just thinking about it because it was heartbreaking to watch, and it could have been prevented if the FDA had done their jobs, but the family even had paperwork that they like a graph that showed how it takes a long time, like on this graph for their drug to release its potency, but the graph was skewed and the margins were separated on one side, but not on the other. And they were told they couldn't use it, but they did. They sent it out to all the doctor's offices, and they created a nonprofit organization under their umbrella that made brochures. Do you know in the hospital that the happy faces, like you have the sad face, like what kind of pain you're in? It's like the sad face, the crying face, and then at the end you're happy. Like there's 10 different ones. They actually created that. It had their logo at the bottom, and they actually made a brochure with this nonprofit organization recommending their opioid as the best painkiller that you should take. It's the best one. And people looked at this brochure, the doctors looked at this brochure and thought, oh, well, this nonprofit organization, Painkillers Association of America or something like that, is recommending this drug, so it must be good. They owned whatever the nonprofit organization was called. They owned it. So of course they're going to recommend, and nobody does the research. The FDA allowed this to happen. So if you're thinking this isn't happening with the pesticides in our country, it is.
It's definitely happening. And we're exposed all the time. And, in Europe, they don't even allow any of these things to be sold at the Home Depot because they shouldn't be anywhere near people, pets, kids, and all that. Like it's much more pro-health, although they actually do still have some really toxic things that they use in agriculture. But like, what can we do at least to be decreasing our daily exposure, right? And that's the kind of thing. It's like, don't pick those things that you're going to be spraying on your patio and your grass,
Yeah. And I do think you mentioned earlier where the farmers are worried about farming, without chemicals. They think they couldn't do it. But the truth is, and I don't know how you feel about this, we didn't talk about this first, but I think one of the keys is eating less fruits and vegetables, less grains. I'm a carnivore, so of course I think that. But I do believe that's one of the big ways we can do that. We can turn all of those fields that are filled with the stuff that make our processed foods, we can fill those with grains and things, that the cows eat naturally. We can bring more livestock in, and most people should be eating more protein than anything else anyway. And I just believe that that's I don't think everybody needs to be a carnivore, but I do think that at least for now, while this is going on, we can decrease some of the pesticides we're eating by eating, more of the animals instead, so that we're not being exposed as much.
And I think that it's important too to think about what a large part of what's driving the GMO agriculture is the animal feed. And then of course it ends up in their bodies, and then we're consuming it.
Yeah.
And then the manure even is used as fertilizer on the organic farms. But
yeah.
But in terms of consuming grass-fed beef, right, and animals, I mean, what a miracle that is, the way that, it's, first of all, so much more humane. It is so good for the soil. There's just so much just bringing the animals onto the ecosystem that so much benefit could come from it.
Yeah, we don't need all those pesticides.
No, we don't. Letting need that.
Yeah, letting the cows eat out of the fields, it is the best way to do that. You get rid of the soybean crops, all the stuff that we use for all of the ultra-processed foods. Get rid of that.
Yeah, just get rid of it.
Fill those massive fields with grass and cows and other, animal meats. Let them just roam and let them eat, and then use that as our food. I mean, to me, and it's going to cost less too. That makes perfect sense. Everybody needs more protein anyway, especially since the government regulations recommend this much protein.
Yeah. But actually, that we're going to change soon.
It's ridiculous.
It really is.
Yeah. We all know about the dirty dozen, the foods that we should be eating that are the dirtiest, the ones that we shouldn't eat unless they're organic. But I feel like there's so much more to that now. I don't even think there is a dirty dozen anymore, because when we were talking about that a lot 10, 15 years ago about that I used to have a list I carried in my wallet of the dirty dozen, before we had cell phones. And I think that it's so confusing now. First of all, it's overwhelming, but there is no dirty dozen anymore, right? I mean, because we used to say the root vegetables were fine because they're grown underground. Things that had a thick peel on them, like citrus and bananas, were fine. Avocados were okay because we didn't have to worry because the peel protected them. But that's not true anymore, right?
Well, so there is still a dirty dozen list that came out. It's interesting. They base, I think, some of it on USDA data, which occasionally they do testing on. But no, and this was the first year the potatoes were added. And I find that interesting because potatoes, you would think, are fine. I don't know. It's not really a crop that I really focused on until I got more into understanding what kinds of things are sprayed. Potatoes are one of the dirtiest things that you can eat. It's a problem because a lot of glyphosate is one of them, but there are some pesticides that are contact. So, they land on the outside of the peel and then you need to wash it off, or maybe you peel it or whatever. There are other pesticides that are systemic. And so they go throughout the entire plant. So there's no washing that type off.
Right.
And that's why you see when people have tested different oranges and apples, or like orange juice, for example, it is getting into the orange systemically because at the bottom of the tree, it's sprayed with weed killer. It goes up through the tree roots and then lands in the fruit, and then it ends up in the orange juice. So unfortunately, there's no washing or getting around that kind of situation at all. And you're absolutely right. I just, when I look at at the conventional options at a grocery store and I'm looking around, and I just know that I really don't want to eat any of them, frankly. I don't typically. I go out to lunch because I want to have a social life, and I'll order a salad, but I'm always sitting there thinking, knowing what's sprayed at all those things and worrying about it, which is too bad. Like, I kind of wish I didn't have that information.
Yeah.
But no, you're right. And it is in terms of eating meat, of course, and I'm sure everyone knows that if you can't eat grass-fed, that's the best way. It's really important to cut the fat off, actually, because that's where, if there were any pesticides, a lot of them will accumulate in that fat, because it's a lot of pesticides are fat loving, so they go to that spot. So cutting that off is oftentimes really important to do.
Actually, the first time I've heard that, I'm actually currently on a fat fast and eating almost exclusively fat.
Oh, are you? Yeah. It's the truest thing. Butter can be extremely dirty. Because of the fat, it collects.
This conversation just took a turn. So we might think that one voice doesn't matter, right? We might think it doesn't matter, but it does. So it's so overwhelming, right? So what do we do? Who do we call? How do we make this right? How do we get them to stop with the stupid liability thing? And how do we get them to quit using all of that stuff on our food so that we can be healthy as a country?
So there are a few things. One is, as much as you can afford it, of course, purchasing organic food is the way to go. And that's going to signal to the market that is what the consumers want. And you do see an expanding amount of options and more viable farms as these farmers realize that they have a consumer. So that is one big thing. Now, unfortunately, organic farming has totally stalled. In fact, there have been farms that have the number of farms have decreased. So I think it's less than 1% of American farms are organic at this point. And it's because it's expensive to do. And so that's where regenerative comes in, where it may not be labeled organic, but a lot of times it is way lower on the pesticide front because it's healthier soil, and the soil couldn't take that many chemical inputs and still be healthy. So that's something to keep your eye on as a consumer, is those companies that are calling things regenerative, whether they're organic or not. That can be a good thing to purchase. And there are a lot of brands that are starting to go into that area. And so it's good to be able to reward them for making the right choices and sourcing. So those are some things you can do with your consumer power. In terms of the pesticide liability shield, this crisis that we are in right now, the best thing that you can do is be reaching out to your congressman. So right now, this liability shield, and it comes in different forms. This isn't the first time they've tried. They tried last year as well. This year, there seems to be more momentum because, for whatever reason, the Republicans did not get the memo that the Republican Party constituents don't have interest in a pesticide liability shield. Like, I think that a lot of the constituents, particularly the women, are waking up in it and saying, why would we ever want that? And so one thing you can do is definitely be contacting your congressperson. I have a lot of resources, including a script, because I know when I first called a congressperson and talk to their staffer there, which is what will happen. You won't talk to the congressperson directly, most likely. But I was nervous and embarrassed because it was outside of what I've ever done. I was like, do I even really know what I'm talking about? I'm just saying like these words, right? So I have a sheet that hopefully you may be able to link to. I have a write-up on my website. Glyphosate Facts is my website, and it gives you instructions as to what to do. And the call to action is changing rapidly because the chemical companies are changing the strategy rapidly. So they're kind of hitting on lots of different places to make it hard for us to organize. So I keep that regularly updated. And another thing you can do is go to stoppoison.org. And you can sign up there to help fight the liability shields. And that goes directly to me. And then when I have a call to action, I email you and let you know what you can do and who to specifically call about it. But Congress is out right now. And so they're home back in their home states and their hometowns. And so it would be a good time to go and make an appointment at your congressman's office. Go and just talk. You once again, it's not likely going to be the congressperson. Go and talk to them and say, listen, I'm really concerned about this pesticide liability shield. This is what I know. And that can make a really big impact, particularly since when they're not in DC, oftentimes it's a little more quiet when they're home. And so it's a perfect time. When they come back in the end of August and September, we expect this issue to be picked up again full force.
Okay. And I think we need to remember that our voices do matter, and social media is an incredible tool. If we could blitz them,
Yes.
like even if you're not an influencer, you're not somebody who posts a lot, you're just a stay-at-home mom, maybe you're a Maha mom and you have kids at home and you post your family pictures and your family vacations and your kids walking for the first time, it makes a difference. Go ahead.
Oh, it totally makes a difference.
Yeah. Post on your social media and tag everybody. Tag the USDA, the FDA, POTUS, tag Bobby, tag all of the people so that they know that this is something that we're talking about. Tag the EPA. If you tag all of those people, they're going to see all of those notifications and they're going to realize that this is something that we're all talking about. So even if you feel like your one little voice or your one little post isn't going to make a difference, if they get hundreds of thousands of tags about this, that people don't want to be fooled anymore, people don't want to be poisoned anymore, maybe they'll wake up to it and start trying to figure out how to fix this instead of cover it up.
100%. And so true. It does not matter how many followers you have. They just know that they're tagged and worried about that.
Yeah,
That's the thing. They don't like looking bad. And particularly if you have your dog and your child, they're like, hey, I want to protect this.
Yeah. If you post, if you openly post pictures of your kids on social media, post your baby and say, why are you poisoning her? Why
Totally. 100%.
I mean, because it shows up in breast milk, it shows up everywhere. So even, it doesn't matter. My baby's not eating solids yet. It does matter. It matters.
It does matter. It definitely matters. And and to that point, if your baby isn't drinking organic formula, that is problematic because a lot of it is soybean based and there are all kinds of chemicals in it. And unfortunately, I didn't know about this at the time. And so my kids were brought up on that and I feel really horrible about it.
Yeah. But,
you can only do what you can do.
Right, exactly. You don't know what you don't know. And we didn't but also how old are your kids?
So I have a 16-year-old and a 20-year-old, and you know what? They're really healthy. So it turned out okay.
Well, what I was going to say is 16 and 20 years ago, it wasn't like that.
Oh, actually, that's a good point. No,
right?
Much better. Thank God.
Don't feel bad.
Oh, yeah, there we go. That's good news. Today's we're also something to worry about.
I mean, maybe it wasn't perfect, but it wasn't like it is now. And that's the thing.
That's true.
Some people can't breastfeed. So you have to use formula.
That's what happened.
Yeah. And the number one ingredient and the most popular formula is corn syrup solids today.
Yeah.
It wasn't like that when you had your kids.
Unbelievable. Yeah, that's true. It is definitely much worse now.
Yeah.
And I got the thought of, and everyone should know this, even if your child is having, my children both had a lot of digestive issues all through their early childhood. And we were able to fix it, with functional approaches, which probably anyone into wellness knows about, but healing the gut. And they're both really thriving, even though those were some difficult moments.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Kelly, this was amazing. Such a great conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
Tell everybody where they can find you.
You can come on to Instagram. You can find me at Glyphosate Girl. And you can find me on Twitter as Glyphosate Girl, but I don't post there as often. And then my website is glyphosatefacts.com, and you can go there and learn a lot more about glyphosate.
Yeah, and make sure you go there and get to the paperwork that you're talking about. That'll help us figure out what to do.
Yes, exactly.
Awesome. Kelly, thank you. I appreciate it.
Thanks so much.
And thank you guys so much for watching. We'll see you next time on the Carnivore Revolution.